Welcome to Shuffle Source. I'm your host Brandon, and today we are back with another Commander Precon upgrade video. This time we will be upgrading the Abzan Armor Precon deck from Tarkir Dragonstorm. Let's get into it. Really fast, before discussing the commander we will be using, let's quickly go over the Precon upgrade format that we use here at Shuffle Source. The first item to note is that we will either use the primary or the secondary commander from the deck. Next, we have a cap of around $100 or less that we use when choosing the upgrades for this deck. We will be adding 10 cards and we will be removing 10 cards. Additionally, we add a few more upgrades that we call no budget options near the end of the video for people that either already have these cards or maybe have a little extra in their budget to upgrade the deck further. And lastly, we do use market value pricing provided by TCG Player at the time of recording, which is displayed at the bottom of the screen when we are discussing the cards. So the commander we will be discussing today is Felothar the Steadfast. For one colorless, a white, a black, and a green, we have a 0/5 legendary creature human warrior that says each creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. Creatures you control can attack as though they didn't have defender, and you can pay 3, tap Felothar, sacrifice another creature, draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness, then discard cards equal to its power. So Felothar is what I consider to be the new and improved Abzan Color Toughness Matters commander. If you enjoyed Doran the Siege Tower before, you're really going to like Felothar so much more. Similar to Doran, the first ability she has is to be able to assign combat damage equal to your creature's toughness rather than its power. Next, having the ability to have all of our defenders be able to attack is a big deal considering the amount of defenders we have in this deck. If you didn't know, defender makes it to where you can't normally attack unless there's an ability that allows them to, such as the one Felothar has. And then lastly, she provides us with a tap ability to be able to sacrifice some of our big toughness creatures and draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness and then discard cards equal to its power. What you will find is that nearly all of the creatures in this deck have a higher toughness than they do power, so you will pretty much always be able to come out ahead with card advantage using this ability. There are also some instances where you might be happy to discard a card or two on purpose to put it into your graveyard because this deck does have a few ways to bring cards back from the graveyard directly to the battlefield. So as you can tell from Felothar's abilities, this deck is all about toughness. The tougher the better. We want to be able to take those very tough creatures that we have and smack our opponents for large amount of damage thanks to our commander's ability. So the way we want to upgrade this deck is by adding more efficient toughness focused creatures, getting us more card advantage, and by providing more toughness matters payoffs for this deck. So for the first of our additions, we have Beast Whisperer coming in at $3.04 for 2 colorless and 2 green. You get a 2/3 creature elf druid that says whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. So this deck has a lot of creatures in it, and being able to get card draw whenever we cast them is going to help us a lot. Now there are a lot of other cards that provide card draw in white, such as Enduring Innocence for example, and some of those would also be a great addition as well. The main difference here is that Beast Whisperer doesn't limit you to once per turn, and a lot of the times you can cast more than one creature with this deck. Consistent card draw is a must-have for every deck, and Beast Whisperer really helps us with that. Here we have our next edition coming in at $8.27. We have Beitor, Kin to All. For 2 colorless, a white, a black, and a green, we have a 5/7 legendary creature spirit dragon that has flying. At the beginning of your end step, if creatures you control have total toughness 10 or greater, draw a card. Then, if creatures you control have total toughness 20 or greater, untap each creature you control. Then, if creatures you control have total toughness 40 or greater, each opponent loses half their life rounded up. So this is the Abzan Toughness Matters deck. So let's add the Abzan Toughness Matters dragon to it. Beitor helps us by giving us more benefits at the beginning of our end step depending on how much toughness we have across the creatures on our board. This can come in the form of card draw, untapping our creatures, or having our opponents lose half their life rounded up. Keep in mind that Beitor adds 7 to the toughness count on his own, so being able to hit the card draw and the untapping ability can happen really quite often with this deck. While you may not always be able to get to the 40 toughness threshold, when it does happen, it can be devastating to your opponents, and it definitely can happen. Also, Beitor having flying actually can really help us get some damage through when we go on the offensive. And here we have our next edition coming in at 90 cents. We have Fecund Greenshell. For 3 colorless and 2 green, we have a 4/6 creature elemental turtle that has reach. As long as you control 10 or more lands, creatures you control get +2/+2. Whenever Fecund Greenshell or another creature you control with toughness greater than its power enters, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield tapped, otherwise put it into your hand. So this is another card that really helps with our toughness payoff strategy that we have with this deck. Firstly, having reach is always nice, considering a lot of our creatures really don't have a reliable way to deal with flying attackers that come our way. Next, it is very possible to control 10 or more lands with this deck, so being able to buff all of your creatures by +2/+2 is an amazing Anthem effect that can definitely happen. Additionally, that third ability it has really does help with being able to hit that 10 land or more threshold. But what really makes this card stand out is that third ability. Being able to get card advantage or ramp every time a creature you control that has greater toughness than power enters the battlefield is very strong for us. Like I said before, that's most creatures in this deck, and this is enters the battlefield, so whether you recur this from the graveyard or cast it directly, it will trigger this ability. This is just an excellent card, and it's such a budget-friendly option. And here we have our next edition coming in at $7.95. We have McCready Lamplight Mayor. For 1 white and 1 black, we have a 1/3 legendary creature human advisor. Whenever a creature you control with power 2 or less attacks, it gains Skulk until end of turn. It can't be blocked by creatures with greater power. Whenever a creature with power 4 or greater attacks you, its controller loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So being able to give all of our creatures Skulk is one of the ways that we can win with this deck. We really take advantage of the fact that most things in this deck have power 2 or less, and we assign damage equal to our toughness value rather than our power value when our commander is on the battlefield. Giving our high toughness creatures Skulk essentially makes them evasive, especially if they have 0 power. We have another card in the deck that gives Skulk as well, Behind the Scenes, so adding this card really gives us some redundancy. Additionally, the second ability helps act as a deterrent from our opponents by having them lose life whenever they attack us with any creature of power 4 or greater, and then we gain 2 life. And here we have our next edition coming in at $4.66. We have Nethroi, Apex of Death. For 2 colorless, white, black, green, you get a 5/5 legendary cat nightmare beast that has Mutate. For 4 colorless, a green or a white, and 2 black. If you cast this spell for its Mutate cost, put it over or under target non-human creature you own. They mutate into the creature on top, plus all abilities from under it. It also has Death Touch and Lifelink, and it has the ability whenever this creature mutates, return any number of target creature cards with total power 10 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So as a spoiler, I ended up cutting Reunion of the House for this card, because this way I can still do what Reunion of the House does, but also have that ability on a creature that can mutate. Considering that most creatures in our deck are power 2 or less, this thing can bring back a lot of creatures. Now granted, you aren't really milling a whole lot with this deck, but you are feeding your graveyard with your commander's sacrifice draw ability, and if your opponents happen to board wipe or anything, you can really end up with a decent amount of creatures back from this card. The mutate ability is also kind of relevant because you can decide if you want to put Nethroi on top or below the creature you want to mutate it with, so you can really choose the best option for the time. I love the idea of giving one of our 0/3 trees Death Touch and Lifelink. That just sounds awesome. Next up, for $6.64, we have Sapling of Kulfener. For 3 colorless and a black or a green and a black or a green, we have a 2/5 legendary creature Treefolk Shaman that has Indestructible. Whenever Sapling of Kulfener attacks, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness, lose life equal to that creature's power, then put it into your hand. So right out of the gate, when you think of the idea of spending 5 mana for a 2/5, you might not think that that's the best rate, but you do need to remember that we have several ways in this deck to assign combat damage based off our toughness value instead of our power. And also, let's not forget that this is indestructible, so you can pretty much take swings at your opponents freely here. And you're going to want to swing every turn with this card, because that's where we're really going to get a lot of the value from this card, is its second ability. Whenever it attacks, we're going to reveal the top card of a library and gain life equal to the toughness and lose life equal to the power. As you remember, our deck is filled with high toughness, low power creatures, so we are going to gain a lot of life from this deck. If you pull a Tree of Redemption, for example, enjoy that 13 life you just gained from this card. I also like that you get to add the card to your hand at the end of this ability, so you do get some extra card advantage from this card as well. This is just a great card for Toughness Matters decks. It's a perfect inclusion. Our next edition costs $9.88. It is 1,000 Year Elixir. For 3 colorless, we have an artifact that says, you may activate abilities of creatures you control as though those creatures had haste. You can also pay 1, tap it, untap target creature. So one of the things about this deck is we do have a lot of great creatures that have very powerful tap abilities, our commander included. And in many instances, we would really like to be able to use those abilities the turn that those creatures hit the battlefield, or on our opponent's turn before the turn cycle makes it back to us again. By giving the activated abilities of our creatures haste, we can immediately use the activated abilities off of our trees, for example, such as Tree of Perdition to knock our opponent's health down to 13. Or maybe we need some card draw off of our commander's ability to fill our hands back up with options. This card really helps with that. The second ability also allows us to untap target creature. This can be really useful in a variety of ways. It can help us untap a blocker for us. Maybe it will allow us to use a tap ability of another creature an additional time. Another option is you could potentially do some politicking with this card, in that you can offer to untap a creature of one of your opponents if they promise to give you something back in return. It just has a lot of utility and is worth an inclusion for this deck. Our next edition, coming in at $22.07, we have Tree of Perdition. For 3 colorless and 1 black, we have a 0/13 creature plant that has Defender. Tap, exchange target opponent's life total with this creature's toughness. So this is another awesome 0/13 toughness creature. Again, in this deck with our commander out, this can deal 13 damage in combat. But really, the big feature that this card has is its tap ability. We can exchange target opponent's life total with Tree of Perdition's toughness. The key part of this is that word exchange here. Let's say that your opponent still has around 40 life and you activate this ability. Now they only have 13 life, and your tree is now a 0/40. Also, if we have 1,000-year elixir out, we can do it the turn this comes out. Now, I will tell you, when your opponents see this, they are probably going to want to get rid of it as soon as they can. So let's say your opponent tries to remove it before you get the chance to activate its ability. If your commander is out, we can just use her sacrifice ability to draw 13 cards off of this, which is a crazy amount of value. This is just a super fun card and absolutely fits the Toughness Matters theme. And here we have our next edition, coming in at $6.26. We have Wall of Shards for 1 colorless and 1 white. We have a 1/8 snow creature wall that has Defender flying and has cumulative upkeep, and opponent gains 1 life. At the beginning of your upkeep, put an age counter on this permanent, then sacrifice it unless you pay its upkeep cost for each age counter on it. This is just an awesome defender for this deck. It comes down early, it has flying, and it's just a great deterrent from your opponent swinging at you in the early game. Now, it does have the cumulative upkeep cost of giving your opponent's life, but honestly, after the cumulative upkeep cost gets too high, just use Felothar's ability to sacrifice it and draw 8 cards from it. You also need to keep in mind that while our commander is out, this is going to be able to attack and swing in the air for 8 damage. This is just an excellent defender card to add to your deck. And here we've made it to the last of our additions. For $3.04, we have Wave of Reckoning. For 4 colorless and 1 white, we have a sorcery that reads, each creature deals damage to itself equal to its power. In Commander, having board wipes in your deck are important for helping to balance out the game if an opponent has way too much of a commanding presence on the board. Because of the fact that most creatures in this deck have higher toughness than they do power, this can sort of serve as a one-sided board wipe in a lot of instances. And the reason I say that is because a majority of our opponent's creatures will probably deal enough damage to themselves to remove them from the battlefield. Alternatively, you could always add the split card Dusk and Dawn as a lower budget option, which is still good as it has the ability to somewhat still serve as a one-sided board wipe, because a lot of the creatures we have are power 3 or less. So we've made it to the removals portion of this video, and we are kicking things off by removing Baitor Ancestor's Voice. For 2 colorless, a white, a black, and a green, we have a 3/5 legendary creature Spirit Dragon that has flying lifelink. At the beginning of your end step, put a number of +1/+1 counters on up to 1 other target creature you control equal to the amount of life you've gained this turn. Return up to 1 target creature card with mana value less than or equal to the amount of life you've lost this turn from your graveyard to the battlefield. So I know we're cutting Baitor, who is the backup commander from this deck, but honestly, he does not really fit anything we're trying to do with our game plan at all. Sure, the flying and the lifelink is nice, but we really don't care too much about life gain or life loss in this deck. And truthfully, the other Baitor is just way more relevant to our game plan, so in this instance, I just swapped Baitor for Baitor. And our next removal is Kulfiner's Urn. For 3 colorless, we have an artifact that says, when a creature with toughness 4 or greater is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may exile it. At the beginning of your end step, if 3 or more cards have been exiled with this artifact, sacrifice it. If you do, return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control. So this is an okay card, but honestly, we have way more reliable ways to return creatures from our graveyard to the battlefield, and until you're able to activate its second ability, you really just spent 3 mana to pretty much do nothing. I understand why it's in the deck, because you can use your commander to purposely sacrifice creatures for card draw, then bring them back later with this card, but you could also be waiting 3 or 4 full turns before this could pay off for you at all. I would just much rather use the 3 mana for something that would provide me more immediate value. Our next removal is Hornet's Nest. For 2 colorless and 1 green, we have a 0/2 creature insect that has Defender. When this creature is dealt damage, create that many 1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and death touch. So this is not a bad card at all. It does act as a decent deterrent from your opponents attacking you for a while, but that's really all it does for you. It doesn't really do too many other things that synergize with the deck, and I feel that the additions we're adding instead provide a lot more value for us. Some people actually prefer this card in decks where you can purposely deal damage to Hornet's Nest to really control the insect production that it has, whereas this deck is really not about that at all. Our next removal is Protector of the Wastes. For 4 colorless and 2 white, we have a 5/5 creature dragon that has flying. When this creature enters or becomes monstrous, exile up to 2 target artifacts and or enchantments controlled by different players. You can also pay 4 colorless and a white for Monstrosity 3. If this creature isn't monstrous, put 3 +1/+1 counters on it and it becomes monstrous. So 6 mana is expensive for a card that really doesn't fit with our toughness game plan. It does have flying, and it does have the potential to exile quite a bit of artifacts and enchantments, but at that point you would have had to invest 11 mana to achieve it. I do like removal on creatures, especially exile removal, but for this particular deck, I would rather have something that just synergizes better with our plan. Our next cut is Reunion of the House. For 5 colorless and 2 white, we have a sorcery that reads, return any number of target creature cards with total power 10 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Exile Reunion of the House. So this card was pretty easy to cut because we are directly replacing it with Nethroi Apex of Death, which has this ability attached to it if you pay for its mutate cost. It also costs the same amount of mana to pay for its mutate cost to get that ability, so it's not like you're having to pay for extra or anything to really get this ability off. Also keep in mind that with this card you have to exile it after you cast it, where you don't have to do that with Nethroi. Here we have our next removal. We have Rock's Faithmender. For 3 colorless and a white, we have a 1/5 creature Rhino Monk that has lifelink. If you would gain life, you gain twice that much life instead. I do like that it is a 1/5 with lifelink in a deck that assigns combat damage equal to the toughness value instead of power, but even then, we're not really in a life gain deck, so its second ability really won't go off enough for us to really feel like we're maximizing the value of this being in the deck at all. I do think that this card was included probably because of the backup commander Baator, Ancestor's Voice, who does care a little bit more about the life gain aspect, but we're also removing him, so I think that our other additions will just go much more further than this card will. And here we have the next of our removals. We have Staff of Completion. For 3 colorless, we have an artifact that has a tap ability, pay 1 life, destroy target permanent you own, tap, pay 2 life, add 1 mana of any color, tap, pay 3 life, proliferate, or tap, pay 4 life, draw a card, or you can pay 5 to untap this artifact. So truly this is one of the first cards that I cut from the deck. The reason is that a lot of the modes that it has, we really don't care too much about. We aren't really focused on proliferating that much. We don't have a lot of cards that we care about sacrificing outside of our commander's ability. We have other ways to mana fix, and 4 life to draw a card really just isn't necessary for us, so we can draw cards with our commander and it doesn't involve us losing life at all. I understand that this card was probably added because of the backup commander where you care about losing life and gaining life, but that's not really the strategy we're going for, so it just seemed right to remove this card. Here we have our next removal. We have Tip the Scales. For 2 colorless and 1 black. We have a sorcery that says sacrifice a creature. When you do, all creatures get -X until end of turn, where X is the sacrificed creature's toughness. So this isn't a bad card. It's just that when I played it, it always felt a bit too clunky, and that a lot of my creatures had really high toughness, and I ended up wiping out a lot of my own creatures with the card itself too. Now, in a lot of other decks, that might not seem so bad, but one of the cool things about Toughness Matters decks is that we have a lot of great board wipe options that exist that are just better and tend to act as more one-sided board wipes. I ended up putting Wave of Reckoning over this card for that reason. If you prefer this type of board wipe instead that focuses on -X, I would actually recommend trying to get a copy of Toxic Deluge instead, as it costs the same amount of mana, because you can use your life as a resource to control exactly how much you want the -X to be, and it isn't tied to any creature that needs to be sacrificed. Again, not a bad card. I just found that it was removing a lot of extra creatures that I had, whereas there's a lot of other board wipes that exist in Toughness Matters decks that are able to affect our opponents while pretty much keeping our board intact. Our next removal is Wall of Reverence. For 3 colorless and 1 white, we have a 1/6 creature spirit wall that has Defender and Flying, and at the beginning of your end step, you may gain life equal to the power of target creature you control. So the 1/6 stat line with Flying is nice, but it's really that second ability that is making us want to remove it from the deck. We are a toughness focused deck, and our power is very low on a majority of our creatures, so you really aren't going to be gaining much life off this at all. Now, if this said gain life off of the toughness value, then we would be having a different conversation here. But in this case, we're going to be adding Sapling of Kelfenir instead, which yes, is more mana, but it also provides significantly more life gain and card advantage on an indestructible body. And here we've made it to the last of our removals. We have Wingmantle Chaplain. For 3 colorless and 1 white, we have a 0/3 creature human cleric that has Defender. When this creature enters, create a 1/1 white bird creature token with Flying for each creature with Defender you control. And then it also has, whenever another creature you control with Defender enters, create a 1/1 white bird creature token with Flying. So 4 mana is a lot of mana for what this card gives you in this deck. Your deck does have a good amount of defenders in it, so it is kind of nice to be able to get some 1/1 flying birds to maybe help as some flying blockers for you. But even then, it's not too often that you're going to be getting enough birds during a game for it to really feel like this was worth playing, in my opinion. Your deck really doesn't care about 1/1 flying birds, as it really doesn't tie into any of the strategies that we're going for at all. In all the playtesting that I ended up doing with this deck, I usually ended up playing a different card for 4 mana instead. And here we've made it to the no budget options part of this video, and we are kicking things off for $27. We have Last March of the Ents. For 6 colorless and 2 green, we have a sorcery that says this spell can't be countered. Draw cards equal to the greatest toughness among creatures you control, then put any number of creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. I know I've said it quite a bit during this video, but I can't stress enough that you have a lot of high toughness creatures in this deck, and you have ways to also temporarily increase the toughness of creatures in this deck. If you happen to cast this spell while we have one of our 13 toughness trees on the board, you can draw 13 cards and then put any number of creatures from your hand onto the battlefield. It's important to note that it's not only the cards you drew, but it also includes any creatures you may have already had in your hand. You might think that 8 mana is a lot for this card, but the fact that it can't be countered means this card is definitely happening, and in most cases you're going to get way more than 8 mana worth of value when you play it. Also, if you happen to have Jaws of Defeat out when you play this card and you're able to play a lot of high toughness creatures, you can deal a massive amount of damage to opponents and really take someone out. Here we have the next of our no budget options coming in at $32.80. We have Smothering Tide. For 3 colorless and 1 white. We have an enchantment that reads, whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If that player doesn't, you create a treasure token. So we have the ability to draw quite a bit of cards with this deck. Your commander's ability really helps with the continued card draw that we need. However, being able to pay for all of those cards is where you might start running into a challenge. Smothering Tithe will really help you get a bunch of treasure tokens, which is great because it will help you with paying for all of the cards that you want to play. Additionally, being in a 3-color deck, being able to sacrifice a treasure to be able to create any color mana you need is also very helpful. Additionally, if your opponents don't want you to have treasure tokens, they're going to have to spend their own mana to stop you from getting them, which means they're doing less meaningful actions with their mana. So Smothering Tithe is just such a powerful card and works really well in pretty much any deck that has white in it, this deck included. And here we have the last of our no budget options coming in at $10.22. We have Zopandrel, Hunger Dominus. For 5 colorless and 2 green, we have a 4/6 legendary creature Phyrexian Horror that has reach. At the beginning of each combat, double the power and toughness of each creature you control until end of turn. You can also pay 2 green Phyrexian, sacrifice 2 other creatures, put an indestructible counter on Zopandrel Hunger Dominus. The green Phyrexian can either be paid with either green mana or 2 life. So first off, I do like the stats. We have another creature who has toughness higher than its power value. It also has reach, which is really nice against any flying creatures that our opponents might have. But the real reason this card is in this deck is for that second ability. At the beginning of combat on each turn, not only your own, you can double the power and toughness of each creature you control until end of turn. This is an incredibly powerful ability for our deck. We have many high toughness creatures, and our commander allows us to assign combat damage equal to toughness instead, which means things like our trees now go up to 26 toughness until the end of the turn. Let's say we're low on life, for example, and Tree of Redemption is out. When this triggers, we can swap our life total to be 26 now. Or if you were ever worried about getting to the 40 toughness threshold on Betor Kin to All's ability, you don't really have to worry about hitting that number now. You're going to be able to reach that so easily with Zopandrel on the board. This ability also works on itself. So during combat, it's going to go up to be an 8-12 with reach, which is enough to eat most dragons that any opponent would swing at you. Also, doubling the toughness of your creatures is another way to double the amount of cards you get to draw with your commander's sacrifice ability in a lot of cases. And lastly, if you're ever worried about Zopandrel being removed, you can always activate its last ability to give it an indestructible token. And in a lot of cases, you can do that in response to your board being wiped and still keep Zopandrel on the board. It's just a really good card, and I would definitely consider adding it to this deck. And there you have it. After upgrading this deck, we have a final upgrade cost of $72.71. This total does not include the no budget options that we went over. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe for more videos. Let me know in the comments below what you think about the Abzan Armor Precon. What cards did you add to your deck? Also, which of the 5 Tarkir Dragonstorm Precons is your favorite? If you want to see Felothar and the Abzan Armor Precon deck in action, you can check out the video link here and watch me and 3 of my friends battle it out to see which Tarkir Dragonstorm Precon takes the victory. Until next time, thank you for watching.